If you would like to achieve creative and financial independence with your art, with your poetry, with your writing, but you're not sure what that looks like, so you apply for grants, you apply for residencies, you apply for awards, you submit, but you're like, man, I'm still making sure that my future is dependent on other people without really having control over the outcome. I want to work with you to show you the steps I used with a client recently who wanted to turn poetry into something that he could eventually live off of because of its work and impact that it has on others. I want to show you how you can do the same thing. My name is Jeff. I am someone who uses poetry as part of my job as an American accent coach and communication leader as well. We use poems as tools to help people improve their communication abilities. So I know that your art can be a vehicle, a tool that you can use to help people achieve their own goals as well. And by increasing our impact, we are able to create lives around our art that I think can sustain you creatively and financially, but you may not be sure of how to do that. So I'm going to walk with you through the process I just used in a private session with Laron. The goal is that you'll be able to take the same steps we used during our session to think about how you want to organize an offer around your work, so that way you can create real change. Everything starts with deciding what is it that we want to bring into the world. So when I first started talking with Laron, he mentioned that he has a book of poems coming out that, when we analyzed it and discussed some of the recurring themes in the book, touched a lot on aspects of men's mental health. And once we decided that, hey, this is the topic that the book is going to be discussing, we then entered into the discussion about, well, who's going to be reading this book or interacting with this book? And we arrived at the idea that we are especially targeting men who are going through their own mental health struggles and looking for community, people that they can express insecurities with, issues with, relationship difficulties with, because Laron is someone who's gone through a divorce, he's gone through job loss, he's gone through car issues, lots of things kind of all happening in a very short time frame. And so he's very aware of the situations that people can go through, and also aware that people can also be going through worse. So as we discussed, we also began kind of thinking about, okay, well, where are these people? Who is the audience, and where does this audience typically interact? In some of the places we settled on, for instance, they may be going to bars, they may be going to entertainment shows, they may be going to churches for communities there as well. So by having that idea of an audience and where they're located, we can also have an idea about where do we need to meet them? Where can we find the people that we are most clearly seeking to impact? This also changed the focus of Laron's book. So Laron is self-publishing. He has an editor that he's working with, and originally he was planning on having this book finished very, very soon. But one of the things that we got to talking about is that, hey, these people that we're targeting, they may not actually be interested in poetry. I mean, yeah, we can be talking about this offer at open mics and things, but poets may not be the actual primary audience. So if we're creating this poetry book on mental health, but the people who are going to read it aren't necessarily poets, what are we going to do about that? And so one of the things that we decided was, hey, instead of just a standard poetry collection, how can we make this something that's going to interact with the group of people that we're most clearly trying to focus on? And so we arrived at the idea that, hey, we're going to make a workbook. Keep the poems, but incorporate things like writing exercises for reflection, exercises that include taking the poem and creating our own analysis, ways that we can use writing as a vehicle towards our own healing, not in terms of therapy necessarily, because neither of us are trained therapists, but as a workbook that can be part of a larger discussion, because what Laron also decided on during our talk was that, hey, maybe the book might not be the actual offer that I want to create, but instead I want to create a discussion group for men centered around these issues. We want to be able to express ourselves more freely with other men in community, because this is a need that he sees in his world where a lot of men aren't comfortable talking about issues that they're going through. So creating that space. Once we settled on this idea that, hey, this poetry book can actually be a workbook that we can incorporate into a discussion group, we had to get some of the logistics for the discussion group finalized, right? So what we decided on, hey, this is going to be a discussion group that's going to meet twice a month. It's going to meet once online, and then it's also going to meet in person. So that way we can touch on people locally, but also people who maybe aren't part of our physical community in our city. Once we have the location down, the next thing that we need to decide is we need to decide, hey, where actually is it going to be meeting if we're doing a physical place? For online, we decided Zoom could work, and we're willing, well, Laron is willing, he said, to pay for a Zoom subscription, so that way he gets access to more of their features and there's no time limits and things like that. But we need a physical place, right? So we decided on, for instance, libraries. At least in the city that we're in, we're fortunate in that you can reserve library rooms for free. And so that can be a meeting place for the group that we create. After finalizing all of this information and getting some of the logistics down, we then needed to start thinking about naming. People need to know what is it exactly that they're signing up for. So we wanted a name that conveyed that. And the name that we arrived at was Soul Sessions for Men. So, by the way, it just sounds like a group you'd be interested in. Keep an eye out for Laron. We'll have some information so you can link up with him in the description. And once we had that name, we decided that, hey, we're going to start creating some promotional material for it. We're also going to start thinking about creating the online space in an area where people can communicate outside of the actual meetings. We settled on using a Facebook group for this, so that way it can post event times, and it can also post, in the meantime, discussion questions, opportunities for members to interact with each other. But to create this Facebook group, now we need some graphics for it, right? We need something to put on the banner. We need something to put for the image. So what are we going to use for that? So we had a quick discussion about how do we symbolize this? What's a good logo? What's something that people can see and already kind of start to get an idea about what it is that the group is about? We talked about some potential logos. We talked about lions being a common figure or symbol for men. We talked about mountains. We talked about fire. We talked about chains. What we arrived at, though, is a bridge. And we chose a bridge because we felt that some of those symbols are a bit cliche and general. You can find many men's support groups using some of that symbol, for instance, like trees or fires or hands or lions. So we decided on a bridge because we haven't seen as much of that. We wanted to convey that sense of going from one location to the next, moving on, progressing. So that's why we settled on that. We used a website called bing.com/create, and we typed in this prompt. So minimalist, black and white logo of, and then, we could put in different types of bridges and things like that. That way, that logo generator, if you're using that, can give you some ideas about symbols that you may want. And if you find one that you like, which you can then do, which we did, is you can create some different types of files. You can create, for instance, transparent files where if you download the image and then go to a site, for instance, like remove.bg, or maybe if you're using a photo editing software, you can put the image to there and it can remove the background. So then you can create flyers or posters or banners and put the image in without any of the background. I would recommend, if you do that, to create a file that is black, so that way if you're putting it on top of a bright colored background, it will show up clearly, or white, so that way if you're putting it on top of a dark colored background, it'll show up clearly. So once we had a general logo that we could start with, and once we had a name, we could then start thinking about what do we actually want to post in our Facebook group and on our social media and things like that. I recommend having what I call bucket posts. Buckets are groups, you can find that online, where all of the posts align under a single theme. To give an example, in the Facebook group for Laron, we have a couple different buckets. We have a research bucket, so we're going to post things about research that we find related to men's health, mental health. We're going to have questions, so another bucket would be a type of question that's related to mental health. Another bucket would be gratitude, so having regular posts that mention things that we are grateful for in our lives. Another bucket could be events, whether our own or other events in the city. So we'll make posts about shows or opportunities to speak with others, group sessions, and things like that. Another bucket could be interviews, so chances to interview people in the community, outside the community, respected names in the field. Another bucket could be live streams, so going live for 5, 10, 15 minutes or longer to discuss a connection to men's mental health. So then, once we have all of our buckets, we can start making posts for each of those buckets, spread them out throughout the week. Also, over time, we're going to start to see which buckets are more popular. So maybe people respond well when we ask questions, but when we do live streams, not that many people show up. Or when we do interviews, people seem very excited, but when we do the gratitude, maybe people seem less responsive to that. So over time, we can start to narrow down the buckets to focus on the ones that do better versus ones that maybe we want to do less frequently. Now, one of the things we realized as we're creating the groups is that groups are difficult because in the beginning, it's going to take a lot of energy to keep it going. For instance, it's very common, I should say, for the person founding a group to be the one that's, asking the question, really trying to drive the engagement. Whereas the long-term goal is for the community to be self-sustaining, for the people who found it to kind of take a step back so that the members can take the center stage, not the person who's leading. To foster that, we didn't want to create the group right away. So the Facebook group has not actually been made yet. What we are doing instead is we're starting off with a wait list. With the wait list, what we can do is we can start to gauge interest in the group that we're creating. We also decided that as we make this group, instead of having one super massive group that has hundreds and hundreds of members as being the goal, one of the issues with that is it can be harder to create a connection with other people. And this is an intimate sort of group. We're trying to get to know people and feel comfortable sharing with them. That may be harder to do in a larger space. So we've shifted the format. And this shift also is going to make it a little bit easier to attain the goals that we have. Because we've decided that, hey, for these groups, maybe instead of having, the goal being 100 members, let's maybe have each group be limited in scope. So each group we decided to have a maximum of 5 members. It's easier to find 5 people to join something that in this case we decided is going to be free than to have 100 people join something. All we need for the first run is 5 people. And speaking with Laron, he said that he felt fairly confident that he could find 5 people that'd be willing to join a group like this and do 2 meetups a month. By limiting it to 5 people, we can now create the wait list to gauge interest. The other reason we want to make the wait list first before we actually create the group on Facebook is we don't want to start the Facebook group, have it be empty, just be posting ourselves with limited interactions, and then people join it and they're like, oh wow, these posts are like from a month ago and no one's doing anything with it. No, we want the momentum to be building immediately as soon as members start joining. So that's why we're waiting to build the group until the group of 5. You may be like, but Jeff, what if more than 5 people show up? What if, for instance, 7 people? Then, for instance, for the wait list, we can start with the first 5. For the people that remain on the wait list. We could say, hey, right now our first group is full, but as soon as the wait list fills a little bit more, we can create a second group. So what Laron can do over time is he can create multiple groups that meet twice a month. So right now it might just be a single group that meets on second and fourth Wednesdays. But then when enough interest comes in, maybe he can also have a group that meets on first and third Wednesdays. And then if that fills up, then maybe we can make another group that meets twice a month on second and fourth Fridays. You get the idea. Over time, we can create lots of tiny little pods of people that are meeting, getting to know each other, and being in community. And then we can organize larger events. Really, it's very open in terms of what this group could become. But it all starts with that first group of 5. Now, one of the things Laron and I talked about was that as we make this Facebook group, we have to acknowledge that the platform doesn't really care about our group. The platform's not going to share all the group notifications with all the members. The platform's not going to push posts, not going to push the promotion unless, for instance, you pay for it, especially nowadays. So what becomes really important is getting people's contact information, especially email. So what we're doing for the waitlist is Laron is creating a waitlist form. So to get on the waitlist, you have to fill out a Google Doc form. One of the questions on this Google Doc form includes a note like, hey, would you like to be notified of upcoming events or updates on the waitlist by email? So by opting in, giving people the choice to say, yes, you may contact me by email. No, you may not contact me by email. We can start to have control over how often people are able to communicate with us and we're able to communicate with them. Because while a platform may throttle, may not allow us to reach everyone that we want to reach whenever we want to reach them, email we can send out and be guaranteed that it will go to the destination. Once we've decided that we want to create this wait list, and once we've decided also on a start date, so in this case with Laron, he wanted to begin late August, now comes the time to letting people know that we're doing this, that we have a wait list and that we're creating this group. So what we did was we spent an hour or so producing some videos. I'll show you a couple of the videos that we made, including this video that walks through the waitlist idea in the introduction to the program that Laron is creating, which you can see here.
Hello, my name is Laron, and I'm here today to talk about my men's mental health group called Soul Sessions for Men. And as a man going through similar things such as divorce, job loss, things of that nature, and I realized that other men also have gone through these situations, in some cases worse situations than I have. And for whatever reason, we've been told to keep it all in, bottled up. And I want to talk to this group as an open discussion forum, so discuss some of those issues so we can help each other heal through those things. And if you're interested in joining that group, I'm really limited to 5 people for the initial run. And it started in August. And if you're interested, give me your email list and I'll send a wait list to you and just fill that out, get it back to me. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
The other video that we did, and this video is especially important because people connect with stories. People are going to eventually want to know why Laron is interested in creating this group in the first place. What's the goal? So Laron also created this video to explain his own background, his own connection to men's mental health.
The reason why I started my group called Soul Sessions for Men is I went through a nasty divorce, and the cause for my divorce was pretty much abuse, verbal, and then at the end of it, it became physical. And I went through a lot of counsel sessions, therapy sessions, and when going through those sessions, what I discovered is a lot of men don't talk about the abuse in their marriage or relationships that they go through. I found out doing research from the domestic violence website and through my therapy session that 1 in 3 men actually do go through abusive relationships in marriage. And I also found out that the suicide rate is 3 times that of women. So we could help understand why we don't talk about our emotions the way we should and why we don't express ourselves emotionally and mentally. And to also help overcome abusive situations in their relationships, whether it's marital, familial, familial or whatever other trauma or abuse they may have gone through in their life. Not necessarily related to divorce, but there's also other kinds of abuse that men go through that we don't really talk about. So that's my whole purpose of starting this group. So to help men overcome some of those traumas they may have been through that haven't been allowed to discuss previously before. So again, if you're interested, I will have a wait list for this group and I will get that out to you. And if you're interested in joining, just fill that out and get it back to me and I'll get you added.
Now, as we were creating this, Laron raised a great question. He said, Jeff, why are people going to care about this group? I'm not an expert. I'm not a therapist. I'm not trained. But I told him that, hey, people aren't coming to this group seeking therapy necessarily. They're not looking for that expert opinion. They're looking for community. They're looking for people that have been through the same thing or similar situations that they have gone through. And Laron, with Laron's experience with divorce, with job loss, with car issues, in budgeting, in finance, and things like that. These are real things that people connect with, that people go through. So people are just trying to have that small group of people that they can be open with together without it being a hierarchy of like, oh, this is an expert, I'm beneath them, or things like that. At this point, we'd already been working together for several hours, and so we needed to create an action plan for once our session was ended. So I'm going to run through the final items that I left Laron with, that I asked him to complete before he starts really pushing out the wait list and promoting and starting his group Soul Sessions for Men. The next thing I asked Laron to do was create a 200-word description of what his group is about, who's it for, and the schedule. Basically, we're trying to really just repeat the mission and the goal and the reason for creating our offer. We're just trying to say it over and over again so that way we have an understanding of what it is, so that way we can, when asked about it, review it with other people quickly without really thinking about it, because it's become so much a part of us. We needed a 200-word description. I also asked him to create a 50-word description. In addition to that, I asked him to create a series of videos. I asked him to create a 1-minute pitch talking about what the group is. I asked him to also create a condensed 30-second version, and then finally a condensed 10-second version. Because there's going to be times where you're talking about whatever it is you're creating, where you're going to have lots of time to explain it, where you're going to have a relatively short amount of time to explain it, and then something you just need to explain in a matter of seconds. This is also the time where he can start gathering information for those bucket posts that I mentioned earlier. So for instance, this is the time to start interviewing other people. This is the time to start sending out poll questions. Send out a message to 20 men and see how they respond to it. And then doing our own kind of informal research so that way we can share it with other people. This is also the time to begin letting people know about the waitlist in general. So I've asked him to directly message 2 or 3 people that he thinks would be interested, or that he thinks knows people that would be interested. People are not very likely to respond to just a post you make on social media. However, when you reach out directly, especially in a genuine way, people are much more likely to respond. These are very similar to the steps I use when I'm creating a poetry offer in connection to communication or accent expansion or the other services I provide professionally to my students. Hopefully this can give you an idea of how you can transform your art into a vehicle that helps you achieve creative and financial independence by impacting others. If you have questions or if you'd like to work on this yourself, be sure to reach out so that way we can get you achieving your goals.